Mr. President, I rise today, I can say out of frustration, out of anger, out of disappointment, that our administration is continuing to break the law that we all passed and that President Biden signed, knowing full well what was in it. And I'm talking about the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA. The reason I'm saying this is because in putting this bill together at the time that we did, I made sure that everyone involved that had to sign off on it, with the President, the Majority Leader, and the Speaker, knew exactly what was in the bill and the purpose of the bill. I still believe that the purpose of this bill was done in the right, proper way. I think it's a transformative bill if they would just stay within the guidelines of how the bill was written. It's not left to interpretation, but they have interpreted. They're trying to basically implement a piece of legislation that they couldn't get passed. And I've said this, the purpose of the bill had three purposes. The first, on the Inflation Reduction Act, was to reduce our debt. We all talked about that. We have $33.8 trillion of debt today, and if everything that we do does not take that into account and not think about our children and grandchildren and future generations, what we're leaving them to is untenable. And something has to be done. So that piece of legislation had debt reduction in it. Debt reduction. It also was based on securing our energy. When the Ukraine war broke out, we were not energy secured. We couldn't help our allies over in Europe. And basically energy was weaponized by Putin. He used it as a weapon, which was very harmful to our allies. And basically I've said this, if you can help the people that are willing to fight and die for the cause you believe in, and we all believed in, the freedoms and democracy that we cherish, then they're not going to be there when you do need them. And the third thing was to bring manufacturing back to America, the building blocks that we need. And transportation is a major building block of how we deliver our goods, how we basically take care of our lives, how we secure our own jobs, and how we're able to pay for our own way through this wonderful world of ours. But it also runs our economy. And I still believe the intent and ability of the IRA to work as we hoped, the level of investment that we've been seeing from the IRA is transformative. We've never seen this type. And people have been predicting us to fall into a recession, if you will, with high inflation, and we've been able to stave that off because we've had this piece of legislation which has given us a kind of a shot in the arm that nowhere else in the world has had. But here's the problems we're running into. It seems, it really truly seems, from my standpoint, because we and my Energy Committee wrote the bill, unknowing to most any American, for over 3 months before it was introduced. And it was done because of the war in Ukraine. It was done because we were not secured. And let me talk to you about transportation. They want to move to electric vehicles sooner than what we're prepared to do. And the building blocks that you need is basically have total, absolute self-reliance on your transportation mode. Up until this piece of legislation, or the intended administration, we were able to take care of basically whether it's planes, trains, automobiles, and everything in between. We could do that with America ingenuity, manufactured in America, or reliable countries. We never had to rely on foreign supply chains that were unreliable, such as China, such as Russia, such as Iran, such as North Korea. But because of the political desires of trying to transform a transportation mode that we weren't able to basically secure ourselves, this is what's happening. If President Biden was still a member of this body and he was Senator Biden, I'll guarantee he would be absolutely incensed in what's happening in any administration with a piece of legislation that he worked so hard or he basically co-signed or signed off on or something he believed in, and watching it completely be shredded. And that's what's happening. Since the administration seems to have forgotten, I'm going to remind everyone what we agreed to. And this was on a phone call that I had with the President, with the Speaker, and with the Majority Leader at the time before the bill was signed. I says, this is a $687 billion bill, $687 billion in revenue. $384 billion of that bill would be invested in energy security while also improving our environment. Energy security, that means we would be producing more energy and be self-secured than at any time. And right now I can say it's worked absolutely the way it was intended to. We are producing more energy in this country today than ever before. we're producing more oil and gas, and we're doing it cleaner than anywhere else in the world. And we're producing LNG to help our foreign allies. So we are doing exactly what we intended to do with this piece of legislation. That was $384 billion. Another $64 billion towards health care. We put a $35 cap on insulin. We're allowing Medicare to negotiate, and we have an extension of lower prices with health care. With the balance, and you've never heard this, we've paid down $239 billion in debt. Now, everything I just told you, you very seldom ever hear from the administration, or really from the president himself, speaking about what this bill, all included, does. You don't hear him speaking about we paid down $237 billion at the most trying times that we have, the most deficit that we've ever carried before. You should be proud of that. First time since 1997 that we have a piece of legislation that was directed, almost a third of that bill, to pay down debt for our future generations. The IRA did that. Never heard it mentioned. Also, what the IRA did and what we intended for it to do was basically give us the energy that we need today, make sure we're producing the fossil in the best, cleanest fashion using all modern technology. And I've always said this, you cannot eliminate your way to a cleaner environment. I know a lot of my environmental friends clear on the far left are thinking, please don't drill anymore, no more oil, no more gas, no more coal. Well, that's not how the world works. It's called global climate. And you can innovate through technology, but you're not going to just tell people to eliminate something. So that's what this bill does. We're producing more energy, as I said today, than ever before, and we're doing it cleaner and with more technology. So we're producing the energy that we have to be energy secured today, while we're investing in the energy that we'd like to have carbon-free in the future. We're doing both. And that's what's creating all this excitement and investment from around the world. But also the purpose was to bring manufacturing back to the United States. Secure the manufacturing that we needed, that we allowed to leave 30 years or more ago, to bring it back home. And now they're trying to change that to meet a radical climate change that basically is going to harm the economy and still be able to help countries that we know are unreliable. It becomes more and more obvious to me every day that it's either frustrating to read the law or is knowingly violating it. That's what they're doing. And I would hope that the President of the United States, if he's watching or listening to me, bring your team in. Ask them how they can basically neglect the way the bill was written and the numbers that we put in the bill and the definitions we put in the bill of what was going to be not left to interpretation, and how it goes to different agencies, whether it be DOE and back up to Treasury, to basically find ways that they can maneuver and work around this. Transportation is fundamental to our economy. Think about this. There's been I've been sitting here long enough listening and watching different proposals. At one time, there was billions, like 60, 70, $80 billion was going to be recommended that we would build charging stations around the country. And I said, let me make sure I understand how history works. I said, I remember reading history books when the Model T was basically brought onto a mass assembly line that the average person could own it. And they were going to be putting cars into every family. I don't remember the federal government stepping up and building filling stations. This is the capitalist society that we live in. The market meets the demand, always has, always will. But this administration was concerned that the market wouldn't meet it, so we had to throw federal dollars at it, which I was totally opposed to, and we've cut that down drastically, because the market has always met it in the capitalist society. That's what we believe in. You either believe in it or you don't. And that was done. I couldn't believe that. And I said, I don't remember us building any filling stations. But again, I don't remember basically during the greatest depression the world has ever seen, 1930s, that FDR ever sent a check to anybody. My grandparents never received any checks. My grandfather received an opportunity to find a job to take care of the kids, my dad and them. We never got a check, but we thought we had to. So you can look back on this and find out how better off we are because of some of the changes we've made into the country that we are today. I think that's what we have to do. I remember waiting in gas lines in 1974. I had to wait to buy gas to go to work. Every other day, whatever your license plate, last number, there were so many different ways you could. And then we started trying to find different ways that we could maybe buy in bulk and be able to use that during times when we could buy gas. I do not intend to stand in line and wait for a battery or battery component for me to drive my vehicle if I'm forced to buy an EV car. And that's what we're doing. We're almost bribing American citizens to buy EVs. The car companies in America, the big three, were so committed that they had to have $7,500 in credit. Now here's General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler. Have to have this money coming from the federal treasury for them to be able to make their market plan. That's their business plan. I says, that makes no sense to me at all. But because I've watched the automobile industry over the years, I love automobiles and I love what they do and how they market them. And basically when they have an oversupply, they use incentives for you and I to want to go buy them. They give you discounts, they give you interest, low rates or no rates, interest, and they do everything they can. But here they needed to have the federal government to entice you to buy a vehicle maybe you don't want, maybe we're not ready for. And I said, well, fine. If that's the direction that we have to go, then don't you think we should get something for it? So that's when I made sure that $3,750 would be basically granted as part of the discount if that you basically sourced the critical minerals from North America or free trade agreement countries or allies of ours, not from foreign supply chains that we believe that was basically unreliable. It makes no sense for us to be fighting over whether to get China out of our supply chains or not. But the bottom line is to have them controlling our building blocks of how we build our batteries, where it comes from, the anodes and cathodes and all the critical minerals and the processing. But let me just show you, basically, when we wrote the bill, we put strict, tough, but achievable standards in the IRA to ensure that China and other nations that don't share our values don't benefit off the backs of American taxpayers. I do not believe that the United States of America and the citizens of our great country and the hard-earned tax dollars they're paying to our treasury should be used to benefit another nation that could use it against us. We made very, very clear on that. If you look at the chart right here, you can just see what they've done. Everything on the left here shows by 2023, 40% of the minerals that must be extracted or processed in the U.S. or free trade agreement countries are recycled in North America. This is written in the bill. This 40%. Guess what? They cut that in half to 20%, arbitrarily, by basically saying that these are temporary rules. They're not permanent rules. This is what we're dealing with. This was in the bill all the way down so that we would not have to rely on sourcing requirements from countries that we couldn't rely on if they wanted to hold us hostage. It goes clear down all the way through. 2024, 50% had to. They cut that, every one of them in half. Every one of them, arbitrarily in half. I would like for the President of the United States to see this, and I'd be happy to make this presentation to him. I want his administration to look at this and try, from the Treasury Department, from Janet Yellen, explain to the President, explain to the American people why you could arbitrarily cut in half the intentions of the bill and what you think that you can do, because we cannot meet the demands in America. With all this investment coming back to our country, they can't do it quick enough because of their political agenda to get more EV cars out the door. That's it. That's the only reason. It's not for securing, basically, this manufacturing back to America quicker. It's not to get off the reliance that we have of unreliable foreign supply chains. It's basically to meet a political agenda. The other $3,750 was supposed to be directly for production, producing the anodes and cathodes. And this is what we're dealing with continuously here. These are the minerals that were extracted, processed in U.S. free trade agreement countries or recycled in North America according to Treasury's proposed rules. That's what they want to do. This is what the IRA says is in the law. This is the bill that you and I and a lot of people voted for, Mr. President, and we've explained to them, follow the law. If you don't follow the law, then you're breaking the law. And I guarantee you, then Senator Biden, now President Biden, would be totally outraged at this. They're also distorting the law to make it easier to qualify for tax credits by pretending the battery components manufactured is the same as critical minerals processing. What I mean by that, You extract the critical minerals wherever they may be in whatever part of our country, and that means that we have to do our permitting reform so that we can start extracting in the United States the large deposits that we haven't been able to get to, and other countries such as Canada, North America, and Australia, free trade agreement countries, processing them, taking them out and getting them ready to go to manufacture. They're now defining manufacturing as part of the processing process. That was never, ever part of the law, and they know that. The fake free trade agreements, including with Indonesia, which is totally controlled by China, which makes them say that, well, we can go to Indonesia and do business with them and use that critical minerals for processing and manufacturing and say it meets the qualifications. It does not. That is not a free trade agreement country. It's absolutely controlled by China. Then we have other battery companies, such as Cattle, that basically that Ford's going to pay a 12% for 10 years, 12% royalty for the technology, without having the ability to create their own technology or basically reverse the technology that was stolen from America. It makes no sense to me at all. And they want the U.S. Treasury tax dollars, the taxpayers of America, to be giving a 12% royalty to China. I mean, it makes no sense, none at all. They did it again last week with the proposed rules of foreign entities of concern, delaying deadlines. We wrote right into the IRA that we're intended to remove China completely from our battery supply chains. The quote from the IRA, the consumer EV tax credit does not apply to any vehicle placed in service after December 31, 24. So I want you to look at this chart here. To quote, this is in the bill, this is how it was written. From the consumer EV tax credit does not apply to any vehicle placed in service after December 31, 2024, with respect to which any of the applicable critical minerals that contain in the battery of such vehicle were extracted, processed, or recycled by a foreign entity of concern. In the basically bipartisan inflation bill that we passed, that basically we identified, and it was written into law, those countries of concern, foreign countries of concern. We wrote that into the law. China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. And then if you see here, this is what was written, the deadline of the Inflation Reduction Act, written into law. No extraction or processing of critical minerals by Chinese entities or other foreign entities of concern after December 31, 24. Look what now the deadline in proposed Treasury rules. These are proposed Treasury rules. They want to change that to 2026 or later. 2026 or later, and this is written into by the law. This is the code. No battery manufactured of Chinese entities or other foreign entities of concern. December 31, 23. We're coming up on that deadline. Look what they did over here. 26 or later. That's for the anodes and cathodes, which is the positive negatives of batteries. That's what they want to do. To meet their political agenda, not to meet basically enticing and manufacturing know-how that we have in America to get us up and running. These investments are coming because of that. But when you strengthen this out and basically lengthen it to these timetables or later, this could go clear for the cycle of the bill, 2032. So, do you think that then Senator Biden would not be incensed to see what was done? In clear view, plain view, any administration doing to his bill or a bill that he supported or a bill that he voted for and what's happening to it now? I don't think so. The credit does also not apply to any vehicle placed in service, as I said, after December 2023, with respect to which any of the components contained in the battery of such vehicle were manufactured, assembled by a foreign entity of concern. China, along with Russia, Iran, North Korea, is listed in the law as foreign entity of concerns. It's listed. They're spelled out. It wasn't like you had to say, well, we're not sure of that interpretation, what that means. What is foreign entity of concern? We spelled it out. And because they're willing to weaponize their control of supply chains against the U.S. and our allies. Russia's already has done that with Ukraine and all of our allies in Europe. China, I'm sure, is doing the same thing with critical minerals that they know that we have to have for the building blocks that we use every day, computers, chips, everything that we need. But now the IRS is proposing temporary exemptions from the end of 2026 to allow batteries containing Chinese minerals to qualify for years longer than the law allows, as the charts show. It completely violates the law. I see it, and I'm sure many of my colleagues do too. Yet this administration is moving forward. I hope the President sees it. I hope he asks for an accounting from his people who are interpreting, implementing it, from the Treasury Department, DOE, from his own people within his environmental council within his office. The IRA clearly set deadlines in 23 and 24, not at the end of 26. Can anyone at the IRS read? Is it that difficult to understand? The IRA clearly set deadlines, 2023 and 2024, not the end of 2026 or later. It's another 3 years of American taxpayers truly getting screwed over by the administration. It's another 3 years of China and other foreign nations reaching deeper into and controlling more of our electric vehicle battery supply chains. And this will put America another 3 years behind. This loophole means that automakers will not be required to know whether Chinese critical minerals are actually in a given battery until 2027. Won't even report it, won't even know where it's coming from. It puts all of our investments that we have coming to a country at a critical disadvantage. If they can undercut and basically flood the market with lower prices, it makes it very difficult for our own manufacturers in the United States of America to be able to find the footing and the support they're going to need to make sure that the batteries and components are made right here in America, and making sure that the critical minerals are coming from countries that we have supply chains that we can rely on. I asked you, what is the point of the IRA with loopholes like this? What's the point of passing the law that automakers can just throw their hands up and say, well, here's a $7,500 tax credit the taxpayers are paying for. This is where your tax dollars are going. And we don't even know where the battery came from, whether it's China, Indonesia, or anywhere else. Worse yet, the IRS under this administration seems to have adopted a new legal strategy to avoid any accountability from the courts or Congress. Now, I want you to hear this. They're basically a new legal strategy to avoid accountability by issuing what they call proposed rules. A proposed rules means that you're working diligently to get the permanent rules in place. Okay? If you can't get them in place, then nothing should go out. There shouldn't be any credits. There shouldn't be any of these incentives until you actually get your act together. Not only they don't get them together, they say they can't even come close to getting them together before 2026, when the law says 23 and 24 in different categories. And they say it might even be later than that. It could be the full. That's what they're using. That's the gimmick. That's the legal strategy to basically usurp the law. Then the IRS can break the law, implement it in a way they wish it was passed, and possibly avoid any judicial review. They're trying to push into the market quicker than what we can basically produce and rely on ourselves, EVs. That's the bottom line. And car companies have changed and done that to put themselves in a position where without the credits and without the incentives from the American taxpayers that are giving them money for the cars, that they think is going to be absolutely destroying their business plan. This is wrong. This is not America. This is not capitalism as we know it. This is not the market-driven performance that we've seen over our lifetimes. It's absolutely ridiculous and not the way the government in this country should operate. I intend to hold the IRS accountable, Mr. President. I will support anyone who attempts a legal challenge to these proposed rules. If you have been damaged by what they're doing and basically putting you in jeopardy of not having your market shares, not being able to get your product to market quick enough, and basically China is overrunning you with lower prices because they're keeping you out of the market, then you should sue the federal government, the Treasury, and I will do an amicus brief behind it because they are breaking the law. Although we can't normally do a Congressional Review Act resolution for proposed rules. They know that. That's their strategy. We'll just do proposed rules. That gives us all the flexibility that we need. This situation is unique. Credits are being awarded as if proposed rules were final. That's what they're doing. That has never been how we've operated. Then Senator Biden knew exactly, and he knows it now, and I'm hoping he gets involved and stops this ridiculousness by some of his administration and some of his heads of his agencies. The Congressional Review Act should apply here. Xi Jinping is already showing that he will use critical minerals as leverage to put Americans in the free world at risk with new restrictions on exports of several critical minerals. I would expect that from Xi Jinping and China. What I never could have expected was our own government to give up so easily and continue to let foreign nations control our nation's transportation. And the administration is breaking our promise to the American people that this bill will reduce our debt. These proposed rules are breaking the law and blowing past the CBO cost estimate. Biggest mistake that we made, biggest mistake that I made, was not putting a cap on the money. If you want to know how we have accumulated $33.8 trillion of debt so quickly, is that when we pass a piece of legislation, and there's a 10-year period on that, CBO scores it. We have to find pay-fors. We want to show that we're prudent, we're paying for things. How can you accumulate? I came here in 2010. The debt was at $13 trillion. We're now at $34 trillion. How can you accumulate that much debt that quick if you're paying for things? Let's quit kidding ourselves. The bottom line is this. They put a piece of legislation. The CBO scores it. It becomes very popular. So we have 10 years of spending authority. We run out of money in 3 or 4 years. Guess what happens? Rather than coming back to the legislature, because it was such a successful program, and expanding upon that, and making sure that we have new appropriations and new ways to pay for the additional services that people want, what happens then? We debt finance it. It's basically added to the debt for the next 6 years if you run out of money in 4. That's what's happening, and no one seems to really care about that. I need my Republican colleagues, I need my Democrat colleagues, and everyone to be serious, the debt we have and how we've accumulated it. If we do 2 things, do this. Stop this craziness of allowing pieces of legislation to have a CBO score. Make it stop when the money runs out. If the money runs out in 4 years, then the spending authority should run out in 4 years. Even though we intended for it to last 10, it didn't. Don't wait until the next party or the next political movement changes it. Do it ourselves so we never get ourselves in this deficit spending and keep accumulating more debt. The second thing, propose rules. Don't let temporary rules basically rule the day. Don't let any credits go out the door. Don't let any incentives take effect until you have permanent rules in place. Then the Treasury would do its job on time. We're not holding anybody accountable whatsoever. And that's what we need to do. Let me be clear. There's no question that the IRA is bringing more investment to this country than ever before. And it'll work the way it was intended to work. Electric vehicle and battery makers announced $52 billion in investments in North American supply chains before the IRS started loosening rules. It was working. It didn't need all this. They're placating just a few players here, the large car makers that basically want this advantage. They want to be quicker because they put so much investments into electric vehicles and we can't supply them. They got way ahead of their skis, and they want the taxpayers of America to pull them out. That's it in a nutshell. In a nutshell. Numbers like this show that breaking the law doesn't get us more investment. It just makes the cost go up for American taxpayers, and it also keeps jobs in China, not bringing them back to America. Administration knows that the deal they made and the intent of the IRA was to secure our energy, reduce our debt, and rebuild our critical supply chain. They are attacking all 3 of those principles. And you have never heard about the good that the bill did and the reason and the purpose of the bill. Reduce our debt. Reduce our debt. Secure energy. We're doing that. And basically rebuild our critical supply chains that are reliable and not dependent on foreign supply chains that basically are unreliable. I'm going to do everything in my power to hold them accountable, protect American taxpayers, and secure energy supply chains. Mr. President, this is something we all should be concerned about. And I say that because of this. If we work hard and we pass a piece of legislation and we have understanding that we all have agreed to on what a bill does, then every agency should adhere to the intent of the legislation. They should not be able to look for loopholes and find loopholes and even write them in when there is no loopholes, but they're doing that. Not just the Democrat administration, Republicans, they've all done this. You can't accumulate $33 trillion of debt or an additional $20 trillion of debt in 12 years, 13 years. You can't do that unless something is critically wrong. And we've been able to show it, and we've seen this, and it has to stop. So I'm asking the President, please get involved, Mr. President. hold your agencies to the letter of the law the way you would if you were still a senator. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor. All right.